Imagine this. You're 17 years old. You're standing alone on a mountainside in Siberia, and everyone around you, your friends, your mentor, people you've known for years, are dying, one by one. And you can't do anything to stop it. You don't know why. There's no visible danger. No avalanche, no predator, no storm. They're just dying, collapsing, bleeding, convulsing, and then going still. And the worst part? No one ever found out what killed them. This isn't a campfire story. This isn't fiction. This happened. August 1993. The Khamar Daban mountain range, Siberia, Russia. 6 people went into those mountains. 1 came out. Her name was Valentina Utochenko. She was a teenager. And what she survived and what she witnessed is something that Russian authorities spent years trying to quietly bury. Tonight, we're going to talk about what really happened on that mountain. We're going to go through every piece of evidence, every witness account, every theory, no matter how dark, no matter how disturbing. Because something up there killed 5 people in a way that defies explanation. And to this day, nobody knows what it was. Let's begin. Before we get into the incident itself, we need to understand where this happened, because the location matters more than people realize. The Khamar Daban mountain range sits in the southern part of Siberia, stretching along the southern shore of Lake Baikal, the deepest freshwater lake on Earth. If you've never seen Lake Baikal, it's one of those places that feels almost alien. The water is so clear, so impossibly blue, it looks like it doesn't belong on this planet. But the mountains above it? There's something else entirely. Khamar Daban is not the most extreme mountain range in Russia. The peaks don't reach those legendary Himalayan heights. But what makes it dangerous, what makes it almost uniquely deadly, is the weather. This range acts as a meteorological wall. Warm, moist air comes rolling in from Central Asia, hits the mountains, and transforms, suddenly and violently. Hikers have described how a clear, sunny morning can turn into a full-blown blizzard within hours. Temperatures can plummet. Visibility drops to 0. And if you're up high when that happens, you are in serious, serious trouble. The Soviet outdoor culture produced a specific type of person, the serious, trained expedition hiker. These weren't casual weekend warriors. They were engineers, scientists, students who spent months preparing for mountain expeditions. They were disciplined. They were tough. They had to be. Which brings us to the group at the center of this story. V. The expedition was led by a woman named Lyudmila Ivanovna Korovina. She was 41 years old, an experienced hiker, a qualified instructor, a woman who had spent years taking groups to the mountains of the Soviet Union. By all accounts, she was skilled, careful, and respected. This was not her first time in Khamar Daban. She knew these mountains. Her group consisted of 5 young people, most of them teenagers or barely out of their teens. Alexander Krisin, aged 23, Tatiana Filipenko, 24, Denis Shvakin, 19, Victoria Zalasova, 17, and Valentina Utochenko, also 17. They had trained together. They knew each other. They were a team. The plan was a standard summer hiking route. Challenging, yes, but entirely manageable for a group of their experience level. They set off in early August 1993. The weather was reasonable. Everything looked fine. 10 days later, rescuers would find 4 of them dead on the mountainside. The body of the group's leader, Lyudmila, would be discovered separately, further along the trail, alone. And 1 teenage girl would emerge from the forest, barely alive, unable to fully explain what she had witnessed. What we know about the group's final days comes from fragments, rescue reports, official documents, and most critically, Valentina's testimony. Piecing it together is not easy. Some details are missing. Some seem almost impossible to believe. But here's what we can say with reasonable confidence. The group was several days into their route when things began to go wrong. It was August 5th. The group had set up camp and was resting when one of the hikers' accounts differ on exactly who it was first, suddenly and violently fell ill. There was no warning, no gradual decline. It was abrupt. The hiker began bleeding from the nose. Then came convulsions, violent, uncontrollable shaking. Then, according to Valentina, the person lost consciousness. And then they died. Now, and I want you to think about this carefully. Imagine you are standing there watching this happen. You are a teenager. You are deep in the Siberian wilderness. You have no satellite phone, no radio contact, no way to call for help. The nearest village is potentially days away, and the person who just died was perfectly healthy an hour ago. What do you do? Ludmila, as the group leader, tried to take control. She made the decision that they needed to move, to get out of the area and find help. Whether she suspected something in the environment, something in the water, something in the air, we don't know. But she made the call. They had to leave immediately. This is where the account becomes deeply disturbing, because as they moved, more members of the group began to show the same symptoms. Not gradually, not in the way you'd expect if this were a standard illness spreading through a group. It was almost simultaneous, or at least it felt that way. Valentina described it as chaos. People who had been walking suddenly unable to stand. People behaving strangely, irrationally. Agitation followed by collapse. There are accounts that suggest some members of the group experienced psychological symptoms before the physical ones: disorientation, panic, behavior that didn't make sense given the situation. One account describes a person running, not toward help, but seemingly at random, as if fleeing something invisible. Within hours, multiple members of the group were dead or incapacitated. Valentina herself was in and out of consciousness. She described feeling weak, paralyzed, barely able to think. She has said she doesn't fully remember what happened, that large portions of those hours are simply gone. What she does remember is waking up, or coming back to awareness and being alone, or nearly alone. She found 2 other survivors nearby, but they were in very bad condition, and within a short period, they too died. She was the last one alive. Somehow, and she has admitted she doesn't entirely understand how Valentina managed to move, to walk, to navigate through the mountains and eventually find another group of hikers who alerted the authorities. When the rescue teams went up to find the group, this is what they found: 4 bodies in a relatively concentrated area, all showing signs of rapid, catastrophic death. Ludmila Korovina's body was found apart from the others. She had made it further along the trail before she died, apparently alone. The bodies showed unusual characteristics. Facial features were described as distorted, possibly from the convulsions and the physical trauma of whatever had happened to them. There were signs of hemorrhage, internal damage. There was no sign of any external physical attack. No animal, no person, no obvious environmental hazard. They were just dead, in the middle of the mountains, on a clear summer day. Now here's where things get murky, because the investigation into the Khamar Daban deaths was not transparent, not even close. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia. Let me say that again: hypothermia, in August, on a day with no documented extreme weather event. For a group led by an experienced mountaineer who had navigated these exact mountains before. The Russian outdoor hiking community, which is small and tight-knit, did not accept this verdict. Not for a second. To understand why the hypothermia explanation fails, you have to understand the timeline. The group did not die over a period of days of gradual exposure. The deaths happened within hours. They happened while people were moving, active, attempting to escape. Hypothermia doesn't work like that. Hypothermia is a slow, creeping killer. What happened to this group was sudden, violent, and overwhelming. More critically, the symptoms Valentina described are not consistent with hypothermia. nosebleeds, convulsions, hemorrhaging, sudden incapacitation, loss of coordination and rational thinking. These are not the symptoms of a body slowly losing heat. These are the symptoms of something attacking the body acutely, something systemic, something that hit fast and hit hard. So what else could it have been? Theory 1. Chemical or toxic exposure. This is probably the most widely discussed theory, and it comes in several forms. The first version involves natural environmental toxins. Khamar Daban is a geologically complex area. There are known deposits of various minerals in the region, and some researchers have pointed to the possibility that the group encountered a natural toxic gas seeping from the ground, something like hydrogen sulfide or carbon monoxide from geological activity. In concentrated bursts, these gases can kill quickly and cause exactly the kind of neurological and hemorrhagic symptoms described. The problem with this theory is that it doesn't fully explain the geographic spread of the deaths, or why Valentina survived while others didn't. If it was a gas pocket, why didn't she die too? The second, and considerably darker version of the chemical theory involves military testing. Here's a fact that tends to get buried in Western coverage of this incident. The Khamar Daban region in the early 1990s was not exactly a quiet, peaceful wilderness. This was the tail end of the Soviet Union and the very beginning of the chaotic, underfunded, desperately poor Russian Federation. Military installations that had operated in secret for decades were being abandoned, decommissioned, or left to decay with minimal oversight. Some researchers believe that the group may have stumbled into an area contaminated by military waste, nerve agent precursors, experimental compounds, or other toxic remnants of Soviet-era military research. The symptoms of some nerve agent exposures are shockingly similar to what Valentina described. Sudden convulsions, loss of bodily control, rapid death. Russian authorities have consistently refused to discuss this possibility in any official capacity, which to many people speaks volumes. Theory 2. Infrasound. This one sounds like science fiction, but it has a basis in actual physics. Infrasound refers to sound waves below the threshold of human hearing, below 20 Hz. We can't hear these frequencies, but we can absolutely feel them. And at sufficient intensity, infrasound doesn't just make you feel uncomfortable. It can cause severe physiological effects. Reported symptoms of infrasound exposure include extreme disorientation, irrational panic and terror, visual disturbances, physical vibration of organs, including the eyeballs, which can cause hallucinations, nausea, and in extreme cases, internal hemorrhaging. Certain mountain formations, under specific wind conditions, can generate infrasound. The particular topography of Khamar Daban has led some researchers to theorize that the group may have camped in a natural infrasound trap, a location where the geometry of the mountains and the weather conditions created a resonance that was essentially lethal. This theory has its supporters and its skeptics. The main argument against it is that the intensities required to cause death through infrasound are extraordinarily high, far higher than anything documented in nature. But the argument for it is that it would explain the psychological symptoms, the panic, the irrational behavior, in a way that other theories don't. Theory 3. Contaminated water. Simpler and perhaps more plausible on the surface. The group was in the wilderness. They were drinking water from natural sources, streams, snowmelt. What if something in that water was contaminated? The problem is dosage and speed. Waterborne illness doesn't work like this. Even the most rapidly acting waterborne toxins take hours to days to produce full symptoms. And they don't typically cause the kind of catastrophic hemorrhagic death described here. Unless the contamination was not biological but chemical. Unless something had gotten into the water supply upstream. Industrial waste, military runoff, something that was both highly toxic and fast-acting. Valentina survived. Did she drink less water? Did she drink from a different source? She has not been able to confirm the specifics of the group's water consumption in those final hours. Theory 4. The military cover-up. This isn't really a separate theory. It runs through all the others. But it deserves its own discussion. The official response to this incident was, by any measure, inadequate. The investigation was cursory. The records were classified or restricted. The families of the victims struggled for years to access even basic information about what happened to their loved ones. Valentina herself, the only witness, the only survivor, gave testimony. But her testimony was apparently not taken as seriously as it should have been, and some researchers believe she was discouraged from speaking publicly about what she experienced. Why would authorities want to suppress information about this incident? The hypothermia explanation, while medically dubious, is politically useful. It places the blame on the environment, on bad luck, on the inherent dangers of wilderness hiking. It removes any possibility of state or military culpability. If the true cause was something connected to military activities in the region, a weapons test, a disposal site, contaminated infrastructure, then the 1993 incident would be, potentially, evidence of criminal negligence or worse. Evidence that the state could not afford to have made public, especially in the chaotic early years of post-Soviet Russia. This may sound like conspiracy thinking, but consider, this is a country that spent decades denying the existence of the Dyatlov Pass incident. That incident, involving 9 dead hikers in 1959 in the Ural Mountains, was classified for decades. The files were only partially released years later, and even now, the officially accepted explanation remains deeply unsatisfying to many researchers. The Khamar Daban incident has never received anything close to that level of public scrutiny. It has largely remained buried, known mainly to the Russian hiking community and to those who go looking for it in obscure corners of the internet. We need to talk about Valentina Utochenko, because in every discussion of this case, she is somehow simultaneously the most important person in the story and the most overlooked. She was 17 years old. She watched everyone she was with die in the span of a few terrifying hours. She was ill herself, barely functional, in and out of consciousness. And then she walked out of the mountains alone. That is extraordinary. That is not something most adults could do. The sheer psychological fortitude required to keep moving, to keep functioning at even a basic level. After experiencing something like that, it's almost incomprehensible. In the years since the incident, Valentina has given limited public statements. She has not sought the spotlight. And this, honestly, should be respected. What she went through was traumatic in a way that words probably can't fully capture. But the details she has shared are consistent, and they are haunting. She has described the speed of what happened, how sudden it was, how there was no warning, just a normal afternoon that turned into a nightmare in what felt like minutes. She has described the sounds, the physical sounds of people in the final stages of whatever was killing them. She has not gone into graphic detail, and we shouldn't press her to. But what she has shared is enough to understand that this was not a peaceful death. This was violent, physical, terrifying. She has described her own experience of whatever affected the group, the weakness, the confusion, the sense that her mind wasn't working properly, the strange, dissociated feeling of watching the situation unfold as if from a distance, unable to fully process what was happening. And she has described the walkout, how she moved through the mountains alone, how she doesn't fully know how she kept going, how she eventually found other hikers, a different group, strangers, who were able to get help. What she has not been able to explain is why she survived when the others didn't. Was it luck? Was it something physiological, a biological difference that made her less susceptible to whatever it was? Was it the fact that she was smaller or lighter, or had consumed less of whatever the lethal agent was? She doesn't know. And that uncertainty, the randomness of it, the fact that she lived and they didn't, and she can't explain. Why is perhaps the most psychologically brutal part of the whole story. Valentina Utochenko survived the Khamar Daban incident. She has carried it with her for over 30 years. Whatever answers she may hold, she has chosen, largely, to keep to herself. And given everything she went through, I think she's earned that right. You cannot talk about the Khamar Daban incident without talking about Dyatlov. In February 1959, 9 experienced Soviet hikers died under mysterious circumstances in the Ural Mountains. Their tent was found abandoned from the inside. Their bodies were scattered across the mountainside. Some were found with severe internal injuries, but no external wounds. Some were found with traces of radioactive contamination. Some showed signs of inexplicable physical trauma. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was classified. Theories range from avalanche to military testing, to ball lightning, to infrasound, to something far more speculative. The Russian government reopened the investigation in 2019 and officially blamed an unusual avalanche. Most researchers remain unconvinced. The parallels with Khamar Daban are obvious and uncomfortable. Both incidents involved experienced, well-trained groups of Soviet and Russian hikers. Both involved sudden, catastrophic, medically anomalous deaths. Both were investigated in ways that raised more questions than they answered. Both have official explanations that fail to account for the full range of documented evidence. And both have been connected, by some researchers, to Russian military activities in remote wilderness areas. Are these incidents connected? Almost certainly not directly. They happened in different mountain ranges, 34 years apart, involving different groups of people. But they may share a cause, or at least a category of cause. The Soviet Union was enormous, secretive, and operated weapons and military programs across its vast territory, with near total lack of public accountability. The wilderness of Siberia and the Urals was, for the Soviet military, effectively a blank canvas, a place where things could be tested, stored, and abandoned with minimal risk of public discovery. That changed, slowly, after 1991. But the physical legacy of what had been built, dumped, tested, and forgotten in those remote regions didn't disappear just because the Soviet Union did. It's still there. Some of it is documented. Much of it probably isn't. The idea that hikers in the 1950s, the 1990s, and potentially even today could wander into the zone of influence of a forgotten military installation, a leaking storage site, a contaminated water source, an area of ongoing but classified activity, is not paranoid speculation. It's a documented phenomenon in other contexts. Unexploded ordnance, toxic waste sites, abandoned chemical plants. These things are real, and they have real consequences for people who encounter them. The question is whether that's what happened at Khamar Daban, and whether anyone in a position of authority has any interest in finding out. I want to step back for a moment and address something directly. Cases like this, Dyatlov, Khamar Daban, other incidents that have been classified or minimized or explained away, can sometimes become a kind of entertainment. The mystery of it, the puzzle to be solved, the thrill of speculating about what really happened. And I think it's worth remembering that these were real people. Ludmila Korovina was a real woman. She was 41 years old. She had experience, knowledge, and dedication. She died alone on a mountain, separated from the group she had tried to lead to safety. Alexander, Tatiana, Denis, and Victoria were real young people. They had whole lives ahead of them. They had families who grieved them, families who spent years trying to get real answers about what happened. And Valentina is a real person who is, as far as we know, still alive today, still carrying the weight of what she survived. The reason to care about getting the truth, the real reason, beyond the fascination of the mystery, is accountability. If people died because of state negligence or military activities, their families deserve to know. The public deserves to know. Not because it changes what happened, but because accountability is how you prevent it from happening again. Russia has a complicated relationship with its own history. The Soviet era left behind not just political and economic legacies, but physical ones: weapons, waste, secrets buried in some of the most remote places on Earth. Many of those secrets have never been fully excavated. Many of those sites have never been fully cleaned up. The Khamar Daban incident may be one data point in a much larger and deeply troubling picture. A picture of what happens when a government treats its own territory and the people who live in and travel through it as expendable. Or it may be something we haven't thought of yet. Something stranger. Something that doesn't fit neatly into any of our theories. The mountains don't give up their secrets easily. The Khamar Daban incident of 1993 remains, officially, unsolved. Valentina Utochenko remains the only witness to what happened in those mountains during those terrible hours. The official record stands at hypothermia, a verdict that satisfies almost no one who looks at the evidence seriously. 5 people died. 1 person survived. The why, the how, the what, all of it remains in the shadows. In the years since, Russia has remained largely silent. No reopened investigation. No new documents released. No public acknowledgement that the official explanation might be insufficient. Maybe one day that will change. Maybe new evidence will surface, or a deathbed confession, or a declassified file that finally makes everything click into place. It happened, more or less, with Dyatlov. It could happen here too. Until then, the Khamar Daban mountains keep their secret. The forests are still there. The trails are still there. And somewhere in those mountains, on a slope that looks like any other slope, 5 people met an end that we still cannot fully explain. Whatever it was, whatever killed them, it didn't announce itself. It didn't leave obvious marks. It came and went like something that didn't want to be found. And maybe that's the most frightening thing of all. Thanks for watching. If you want to go deeper on cases like this, Dyatlov, Soviet-era classified incidents, or other unexplained wilderness deaths, subscribe, because we're not done yet. Not even close. Stay curious, stay careful, and don't go hiking in Siberia alone.